evening, weary traveler. What brings you to my neck of the woods? Oh, in search of fabled ghost stories and legends of old. Well, you've come to the right place. You won't find more ghost stories than in a place like this. In fact, I will tell you a legend. One that is near dear to me. Please, have a seat on the log before you. Why the pumpkin? Well, it's a secret, and I'm not one to tell secrets. Listen to my story, and then maybe I'll tell you. Now, our story begins in the town of Greensburg. Greensburg is a small town located on the eastern shore of the Hudson River in the state of New York. There's a little valley not far from Greensburg. The old Dutch settlers call this valley Sleepy Hollow. It's, that big tree there. Walk past it, get on the small road, take it all the way north. You'll run into it. Can't miss it. People from all over the world say that Sleepy Hollow is the quietest place. A little babbling brook came through the valley, and only an occasional woodpecker would disturb this quiet scene. However, the folks of Sleepy Hollow tell tales about the ghosts of an old Indian chief having powwows and seeing strange lights and hearing eerie music and voices. The most commonly told story? Well, that was of the Headless Horseman. According to legend, he would appear on a ghostly horse. The horse would always be galloping at a breakneck speed in order to get back to the churchyard before dawn. Seeing a ghost on a large horse was rather scary, and realizing the rider was missing his head was downright frightful to the townspeople. Now, this is when an old school teacher named Ichabod Crane comes into play. Now, Ichabod Crane was originally from Connecticut. He was tall, lanky, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, and feet as big as shovels. Quite the goofy-looking man, if I do say so myself. His head was small and flat on top, with huge ears, large green glassy eyes, and a long, sharp nose. When he walked, you could easily mistake him for a scarecrow eloping through a cornfield. Frightened more children than I, that man. He was hired to teach the children of the farmers in the area. His schoolhouse was a low log building with only one classroom. There was a large stream behind the school, big birch trees, and rolling hills. Ichabod kept a tight rein on the children. He would not inflict unnecessary punishment, but if one of the young Dutch wrong-headed urchins needed an attitude adjustment, he would be happy to provide it. Ichabod would stay about a week with one local farmer family, and during the time he would be fed. They provided him a room, but after a week was up, he would tie all of his belongings together and carry on to the next farm. Life as a school teacher back then Sometimes you either stayed in the schoolhouse or you went family to family, eating home-cooked meals from other men's wives. Not exactly the career choice most men would pick these days, but who am I? Not a scholar, that's for sure. While traveling from farm to farm, he accumulated a large amount of local gossip. Ichabod enjoyed sharing this gossip with everybody. In order to make himself useful, which was surprising, between his time of teaching school children and gossiping, he was actually able to be of help to the townspeople. Ichabod would help around the farms where he would stay at. He would help make hay, mend fences, water the horses, and cut the wood. Quite a manly scholar, you might say. Ichabod also loved to sing, and gave the children singing lessons, sang in the local church choir, and was often heard humming a hymn. You know, I'm quite the singer myself. I'm told I'm quite a good baritone. The local farmers thought he was quite smart, as he read books and even owned several books. Books were quite a rarity in those old farm towns, unless they were used to hold up a stool or keep a door open. The local farmers thought that Ichabod was quite the know-it-all also. Not exactly their most favorite kind of person. Used a lot of big words and never clicked with them. He was often seen reading the history of the New England witchcraft behind the schoolhouse. Quite unusual behavior for such a schizophrenic man. Ichabod often joined the old Dutch wives in front of the fire in the evening. They would be spinning their wool while telling tales of haunted houses, trees, and bridges. Of course, no evening would be complete without talking about ghosts and goblins, of course. The wives were particularly graphic when describing the Headless Horseman galloping around in the middle of the night. Almost makes you pumpkin blush, doesn't it? In turn, Ichabod Crane would tell them his favorite tales while growing up in Connecticut. He spoke of witches and witchcraft, shooting stars crashing down, and comets creating large craters in the earth. After an evening of scary stories, Ichabod was always a bit fearful walking home. He frequently thought he saw ghosts dancing, heard goblins laughing, and even felt the Headless Horseman galloping by. Upon further investigations, the ghosts were tree branches swaying in the wind, the goblins laughing were Ichabod stepping on crusty ice and snow, and the Headless Horseman. Well, Ichabod wasn't sure what it was that he had felt. Although, in general, Ichabod was, liked by everyone, mostly. And, Ichabod got along well with the townspeople. But there was one in particular that he really fancied. One, certain Miss Katrina Van Tassel. Oh, she was the only daughter of a very wealthy old Dutch farmer, Boltus Van Tassel. Now, Katrina was 18 and very beautiful. She always wore the most perfect dresses. Her great-great-grandmother had brought a pure golden necklace from Holland. Everybody thought it made her eyes sparkle even more. Katrina was very fortunate indeed to be allowed to wear it. Her father had created a comfortable, cozy, and happy home. The house was surrounded by lush green grass, strong Dutch elm trees, and a lovely, babbling brook. The farm was quite big. It had pigs, turkeys, and of course horses. Farmer Van Tassel grew wheat, rye, buckwheat, Indian corn, of that such. If it wasn't enough, he also had several orchards growing tasty pears, lush apples, and juicy peaches. Makes your stomach grumble, doesn't it? Yes, I lost that ability long ago. Inside of the main... What did I mean? Don't worry about it. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. Inside the Boltus's main house. It was beautiful, yet functional. It was decorated in old Dutch style, very traditional. Dark mahogany furniture, decorations, blue Delft pottery. Don't look at me, fancy words. I don't know. The first time Ichabod laid eyes upon Katrina, he resolved to marry her. Not only because she would make for a lovely wife, but she would inherit this magnificent farm. She would get everything. And of course, in return, if Ichabod was able to marry Katrina, he would become master of all of it. It's how things worked back in the day. Not like today, I assure you. Unfortunately, Ichabod was not the only man who took an interest in Katrina. Oh no. Adam von Brunt, or commonly called Brom Bones, was a stout, broad-shouldered, tall young man with short, curly black hair. Now, I will tell you, it is a common misconception that Adam von Brunt and Brom Bones were the same man. I can tell you, they duly were not the same man. Brom was famous for his sense of humor and great laugh. He also gained the respect from those around him for his amazing horsemanship. Brom knew Ichabod fancied Katrina and loved playing practical jokes on him. One day, he broke into the schoolroom and turned the desks upside down. The following month, he plugged up the chimney. Ichabod assumed the schoolhouse was possessed. Such a prankster that Brom Bones was. More of a show-off than anything else. All talk and no bite he was. No, sorry. Rambling. One day, in the middle of the children's lesson at the schoolyard, Ichabod received an invitation to a party that night at the Van Tassel's home. He immediately dismissed the children. The children ran out the schoolroom, turning over book, ink pot, desk, chairs all over. However, Ichabod didn't care. Ichabod was excited about the party. He spent hours getting ready. What a pompous buffoon, if you ask me. So high and mighty, full of himself. Get this, he borrowed an old horse from his current landlord, Hans Van Ripper. The horse Gunpowder had lost an eye. But he'd not lost his spirit. Ichabod was quite the sight when he rode on old Gunpowder. His knees were almost in his arms, elbows like wings, and his black coat flapping, and a small wool hat pulled down towards his nose. He looked like quite a galloping grasshopper. He was riding towards the farm, and he dreamed of Katrina, making buckwheat pancakes with juicy apples for him, a slew of well-behaved children by his side, and him in charge of the mansion. Ichabod could not be happier in anticipation. Well, it just so happened that Brom Bones was also invited, and arrived in style on his favorite horse, Daredevil. This pitch-black-colored horse was just like Brom, full of mischief and tricks. When Ichabod walked into the house, he was greeted by a banquet of food that only the old Dutch wives could have managed. The food looked incredible. There were shortcakes, honey cakes, oliekoeks, blah blah blah, Dutch food. Ichabod enjoyed the food enormously. Man had a hollow leg, ate everything in sight, never gained weight. He could not stop thinking about how nice it would be to be the lord of all of this someday. He wanted to turn his back on the schoolhouse, the unruly children, and the small-minded, depressing people like Hans Van Ripper. Yes, quite the likable man already, you can tell. After dinner, the party got into full swing, and the dance floor was full of happy couples dancing. I'm not one to dance. Ichabod joined them and was dancing like a madman. Everybody admired his wild moves. Everybody except Brom Bones. He was sitting by himself. He was clearly unhappy and had a scowl on his face. Oh, little sourpuss. Like I said, all talk. Man couldn't even dance. Eventually, the dancing stopped and the people started to tell tales of great battles in the area, scary ghosts, and nearby old legends. Somebody told the story of a ghost woman dressed in white. She had disappeared one snowy night walking home. Nowadays, during particularly dark snowy nights, she would be heard shrieking in the area where she was last seen. It's annoying, I do tell you. Worst neighbor ever. Inevitable. The stories came back around to the famous Headless Horseman. It was, after all, the most favorite legend in the Sleepy Hollow area. Not to brag, of course. The legend of the Headless Horseman stated that a certain Mr. Brower did not believe in ghosts. Then one dark evening, Mr. Brower encountered the horseman while trying to cross the wooden bridge behind the church. When Mr. Brower attempted to cross the bridge, the Headless Horseman turned into a skeleton and threw the old man into the stream and galloped away. Ah, yes. What a joke. Brom Bones joined the conversation and added that he once encountered the Headless Horseman. He told the crowd that the horseman disappeared in a flash of fire as he himself tried to cross the same bridge. Oh, Brom, he knows that's not what happened. Eventually, the farmers gathered up their belongings and rode off in their wagons, as their farm work would start again early in the morning. Ichabod decided to make his move and walked up to Katrina. The talk, well, it didn't go the way Ichabod had hoped for, as he hastily departed on his borrowed horse. Yep, old boy got rejected, he did. Not that we're surprised. Dude looked like a clown. Got no riz. Sorry. Trying to appeal to the next generation. Dumb. Anyway, Ichabod was crestfallen from Katrina's rejection. He rode slowly in the dark and quiet night. He then came upon a large, old, gnarled tree. All of the stories of ghosts and goblins suddenly flooded back in his mind. As Ichabod came closer to the tree, he started to whistle to calm his nerves. He thought he heard whistling back, but it was just the wind. Or was it? Then he thought he saw a white human shape around the old tree, but it was just some exposed bark on the trunk. Suddenly he heard a groan, and his knees and teeth started to chatter. After he thought about it more clearly, he realized it was just the branches rubbing against each other. He safely passed the tree, but he was clearly shaken. My man needs to take a melatonin. But 200 yards from the old tree, a small stream crossed the road. A few logs were tied together in order to make a makeshift bridge. On the other side was Wiley's Swamp, consisting of thick oak and chestnut trees. The swamp never looked too friendly, but it looked particularly creepy and eerie that evening. As old Gunpowder approached the stream, he balked and refused to get off the bridge. Ichabod kicked the horse, and it shot forward. Suddenly, it came to a complete standstill, and almost threw Ichabod over his head. Ichabod looked up and saw something huge and misshapen in the distance. "Who are you?" stammered Ichabod, but there was no reply. He tried to get his horse to move, but it was as if the horse was bolted to the ground. Suddenly, the large shape moved towards the middle of the road. Ichabod had recognized it immediately. A huge horse with a large rider on top. Ichabod remembered all of the stories of the Headless Horseman, and he did not want to end up on the stream like Old Man Brower. Poor soul. Ichabod became more desperate as it appeared. The horseman had no intention of moving or talking. Ichabod attempted to calm himself by whistling, however his lips were so dry, no sounds came out. Suddenly the horseman turned, and Ichabod was horror-struck. The horseman was indeed headless. His horror doubled when he realized the horseman's head was carried in front of him on his saddle. Ichabod lost it. He desperately spurred on his horse. By raining down blows and kicks upon old Gunpowder, the steed finally took off and galloped like it was possessed. Ichabod realized too late that the horse was heading for Sleepy Hollow and the famous wooden bridge behind the churchyard. This is what the legend of the Sleepy Hollow talked about. Suddenly, the girth of the saddle gave way. Ichabod collapsed the horse's neck, and the saddle fell to the ground. His pursuer trampled it with his horse's hoofs. Ichabod was barely hanging on, and told himself that he needed to hang on until crossing the bridge. Then he would be safe. However, the ghost was gaining on him. He spurred Gunpowder on from the side and thundered over the wooden bridge. Looking back, he hoped that part of the legend would be coming true, and that the headless horseman would vanish in a flash of fire. He wished. Ichabod screamed as he saw the head of the headless horseman being hurled towards him. He did not have time to duck. Ichabod let go with a scream and trampled headlong into the dust. Gunpowder rode on at breakneck speed without its rider, and the headless horseman rode by like a tornado. The next morning, old Gunpowder was found without a saddle, nibbling at the grass in front of his master's farm entrance. Ichabod did not show up for breakfast. He also didn't show up for school. After he did not show up for dinner, Ichabod's favorite meal, Hans Van Ripper became worried. Hans decided to open Ichabod's handkerchief and search it. He was hoping to find some clues about his whereabouts. Unfortunately, the contents did not reveal any information about what possibly could have happened to poor Ichabod. The next day, one of the local villagers found a trampled saddle with hoof tracks all over it. He also found Ichabod's hat nearby. The hat looked like a horse had trampled it as well. The people of Sleepy Hollow were worried he might have fallen into the stream and searched it thoroughly. However, no body turned up. There was much speculation by the locals. Eventually, they settled on the version that Schoolmaster Crane had been carried off to hell by the headless horseman. Oh, I do love that story. Well, it is getting late, traveler. I would suggest you get a move on before you lose moonlight. It has been a pleasure. I do hope you find what you're looking for. But, I suggest you not stay in town too long. Wouldn't want to overstay your welcome. Or you just might end up suffering the same fate that Crane did by my hands long ago. Have a wonderful evening, traveler. I do hope to see you real soon.